Hi, everybody. I'm Colleen Ryan. I'm the Consulting Executive Director for the New York State CDFI Coalition. We are so glad that you could join us on our all hands Zoom today. While most of you on the call are CDFI executives, we always have a couple of special guests listening in, or people who might watch the video later. So I always like to provide an elevator soundbite of what New York State Community Development Financial Institutions, or CDFIs, do. We provide financial services and education for low-income New Yorkers. We leverage federal and private dollars for economic development. We create market-based solutions that provide capital to chronically underserved communities across the state. And we promote responsible alternatives to predatory loans. Since 1995, the New York State CDFI Coalition has been the organizer and catalyst for the strategic initiatives that help CDFIs in the communities they serve. The coalition provides a collective voice, allowing our members to stay locally focused while delivering impact associated with increased scale. That's one of the reasons we launched these all hands meetings. During the pandemic, the New York State CDFI Coalition board got into the rhythm of meeting by Zoom once a week at lunchtime. And in these Friday noon Zooms, CDFI's executives from across the state compared notes, expressed frustration, and collaborated on some of the biggest challenges of their careers. We thought it would be a good idea to extend this opportunity to our members and convene a meeting every other month where we could share business updates, celebrate milestones, and give everyone a chance to ask questions. Looking around at the list, I do not see Bill Carson. Bill, if you're there, let me know. I do not see him. So I think we'll go right on to the meat of the program, which is Jennifer Rutledge. So one of the questions that came up on one of these calls was, what could the coalition provide around the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion? So we received a grant from US Bank to support the cost of hiring a consultant to lead us in this discussion and exploration of the topic. And we are delighted to have Jennifer Rutledge with us today. I'm looking again to see if Bill has joined us, but I don't see him. But before I introduce Jennifer, I do want you to start thinking about what you want to talk about during the Q&A at the end of this hour. Funding and financing, best practices, legislative issues, products or services for CDFIs, special events or job postings. You put your thinking caps on, and when Jennifer wraps up, we'll go back to a discussion amongst the rest of us. So please join me in welcoming Jennifer Rutledge. She's the principal of Delphi Consultants. She's going to lead us in conversation today. Jennifer understands that CDFI leaders and others who have been deeply engaged in eliminating disparities in under-resourced, underserved communities, for them, the pursuit of social justice is not new. Late last year, Jennifer created a survey to establish a baseline for where New York State CDFIs were with DEI work in their own institutions. And more than half of our members responded to the survey. So on April 22nd and May 6th, she facilitated 2 conversations with our members. And in this summary discussion, we hope to identify tools and techniques that will help move our organizations forward in our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to address the challenges and barriers to racial and economic justice faced by our communities. Jennifer, take it away.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Good to see everybody again. Good to be with you. Thank you. So can everyone see my screen? I understand we have limited time today, but because we want to do a discussion this afternoon, so we have limited our presentation, and we're going to get right into our discussion. But before we do, I would be remiss if I didn't offer my deepest condolences to those who live in service, work with, have family members, etc., in the Buffalo area. You're in my thoughts, you're in my prayers. Also, we are now also mourning the loss and celebrating the legacy of I got this right, Urvashi Vaid, leader, activist in LGBTQIA. My thoughts are with that community as well. So moving on today, as you know, we had 3, this is our 3rd and final roundtable. We will do a summary report based on what we've discussed and unearthed and ways in which we are intending to move forward. Our ground rules are still in effect. We are here to help and to share. And so it is a safe space for that, to allow us to do that. First question right out the gate. What is the one challenge you're facing in your DEI journey. We have talked about all of the ways that you've been engaged in this, from the composition of your organizations to organization-wide practices to policies, plans, community engagement, education and training, communications and marketing, vendors and suppliers and purchasing agreements, and all kinds of good stuff. But what's the one challenge, one stumbling block, one barrier that you're facing? Feel free to use the chat. And I only want one, and watch those conjunctions. One is one. No bullet points, no conjunctions. One. Come on, you know, you can be honest.
Hi, Jennifer. It's Chad.
How are
How
you?
are you?
Good.
Good to see you. So we're you know, as mentioned, we're fairly new in developing the community development program. And as mentioned, you know, we're opening up the financial development center in Poughkeepsie, which I appreciate your previous involvement, and maybe we should have a sideline discussion.
Absolutely.
More on that. But we've had really good buy-in from our board of directors and our executive suite on the mission of what a credit union means and the community development movement, which is great. So our target market being the underserved, low to moderate income,
right?
Kind of leaning into a little bit about minority-owned businesses, but there is a reluctance to fully embrace the use of terms that might trigger political responses when we're talking about social justice.
Oh, really?
What that means. So it, you know,
Okay.
and all, like, you know, providing equitable service to everybody.
Okay.
So in this political environment that we're in and have been in, unfortunately, for too long, there is some sensitivity to fully embracing and marketing that perspective.
Yes,
so
understand.
You try, and so I'm trying to figure out the best way to ease into that discussion to kind of reach that embracement. So I'm taking my time. I'm working. Again, we've got full buy-in on everything else, but I think that there is some political sensitivity with some of our existing membership who might feel that that's a little bit too progressive, and I don't want to push too hard right now, but I certainly want to make that an effort going forward. So really maybe just trying to get some advice on how to best address that and what sort of time frame to work with.
Okay, and so this and I think this aligns. Thanks, Chad. I think this aligns with Nancy puts in the chat. And we walk the walk. We need to show it on paper and in writing better. This is about messaging. We talked a little bit about language last time. You know, there's some talk about even, you know, avoiding the phrase minority, that we talk about people of color, communities of color, BIPOC, et cetera, or being able to recognize and use language that people use for themselves, that they want to use for, that they want others to use. But I understand messaging. I'm not sure, Chad, where we were, why social justice is giving you a hard time in equity, but because I was ready for you to say things like woke and critical race theory. I'm anti-racism and anti-oppression, but when you go all the way back to social justice, we got work to do, don't we, Chad?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
all righty, good to know. Good to know. Putting the messaging, making sure people have the right language, ensuring that we can put it on paper and convey that message effectively for a broad audience or for targeted audiences with maintaining the consistency. All right, let's move on. Another challenge? Thank you both. Yes, go ahead. I know you're not Victoria.
Hi there.
Hi.
I don't know how my name, yeah, oh, that's because Victoria, I attended the last two, but for some reason I didn't get the invitation for this one.
Okay.
We're such a small office. We only have 6 people, and I'd say I primarily work from home. And I'd say the other people, it's like 90% from home, and 1 person always is at the office. Our biggest issue is we are all such separated. We meet twice a week as groups, but we also like meet all the time as much as possible. But I'd say right now that's our biggest challenge, is the disconnect between each of us, and then trying to figure out how to be more effective in that realm.
Right, got it.
Simplest way of putting it, yeah.
Well, it's really and concise too. Thanks. 1 or 2 more. Challenges you're facing, stumbling blocks, hiccups, and actual barriers. Okay. Again, okay, someone's put something in the chat. It's challenging to reconcile all the urgency to make change. Again, urgency to make change with the resources at hand, time, capacity, bandwidth, though money can be more of that, so money as well. Yeah, okay. So we've got a couple, that's a few challenges. It's a sense of urgency to make change given what we have, the resources we have, you know, our capacity, our money, the money, and yeah, time and bandwidth, especially time, bandwidth, and money. Time, treasures, and talents. Got it. Understood. All righty. Any others? I see that Mr. Carson has joined us. So before we get to our next, how we can help, I'll turn it back over to Colleen.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I apologize for the delay in being able to bring Mr. Carson on, but I'm delighted to welcome him. He is the Vice President at US Bancorp Community Development Corporation, that's USBCDC. He leads their New Markets Tax Credits business development for the Southeastern region, and is in charge of national investments with Habitat for Humanity International. Previously, Bill launched and directed USBCDC's Infuse strategy, a data and impact-driven effort to expand USBCDC's, that's just a great, that's like a little song, isn't it? USBCDC, community impact, create new investment tools, and forge new partnerships with CDFIs. Prior to joining USBCDC in 2015, Bill led corporate sustainability for McCormick Barron Salazar companies, helping them receive numerous awards for excellence in green urban development. Bill is a Cornell University engineering alum. Is Ithaca in the house? I thought I saw you earlier. And holds a master's degree in policy and management from Washington University. Please join me in welcoming Bill Carlson with gratitude for their support for this program. Thanks, Bill.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your patience with the Zoom issues this morning, but really glad to see all of you. And thank you, Colleen, for that great and warm welcome. I've never quite said USBCDC so mellifluously, so I'll start to do that from now on. Well, as Colleen said, I do work mostly in the Southeastern United States, but we've had the privilege of working on a fairly regular basis with Aisha Benson of True Fund in the Northeast and in their investments in the Southeastern United States. But as also Colleen read, I'm actually a native New Yorker. I'm born in the Bronx and did a lot of growing up in and around New York and Pennsylvania. I went to college in upstate New York and have relatives still in the Bronx and White Plains. Poughkeepsie, and spread throughout the state. So very happy to have the opportunity to meet with the New York State Coalition today, and really pleased that all of you have decided to join us on this anti-bias, anti-racism journey. US Bank CDC is based in St. Louis, Missouri, and as you may know, we're the leading new markets tax credit investor About 6 or 7 years ago, we decided to vastly change our new market tax credit investment strategy to really focus on racial equity. We realized as an organization that we had a special responsibility to use our new markets tax credits in a way that was deeply in alignment with the federal goals for new markets tax credit equity, but at the same time that we knew that we had a lot of deep experience and investment experience in working in distressed communities and in working to improve distressed communities, but we really didn't have a very deep understanding ourselves of the roots of community distress. And a lot of the underlying causes of community distress are based in institutional racism and historic racism and segregation, and in many things that have been intentionally done to communities of color from the beginning of American history to the present. So we've actually changed that work. We started working with an organization called Crossroads Anti-Racism that's based out of Chicago, but works nationally. We put our own staff through that organization's work to really understand the historical aspects, legal aspects, legislative aspects of what institutional racism looked like and how it had an impact on the banking and financial industry. And then we started to invite our partners and clients, CDFI partners like True Fund, to the table, the attorneys that work with us, the accountants that work with us, a lot of our partners in the projects that we worked with across the country, and then started to expand that work within other aspects of the U.S. Bank. Recognized that we couldn't do this work alone, and that we needed to create an ecosystem of folks that had a very similar language around anti-racism and a similar mission of using our investment work to solve issues, or at least to make a dent in some of the issues that have been caused over time by organizations like our own in having racist practices built into our credit policies and built into our investment practices, and figuring out ways to undo those practices. So this is something we're obviously not afraid to talk about, and something that we are continuing to work on, and that we've not reached the end of our journey. We definitely recognize that issues of community distress did not happen overnight, and they're not going to be solved overnight. So we think of this as generational work that we're deeply committed to and invested to. You may have seen that as a result of the killing of George Floyd, U.S. Bank announced a number of new corporate-wide initiatives around an equity access commitment. And then 2 weeks ago, we announced a new community benefits agreement that is going to increase our investments by more than $100 billion over the next 5 years. A lot of it focused on communities and people of color, small businesses, emerging businesses, really focusing on increasing the amount of equity that we, racial equity that we are focused on, and increasing the access that people of color and businesses of color have access to capital. So, as I said, we're really thrilled to be here. We're glad the New York State Coalition has decided to join us on this journey, and we're really pleased to be a sponsor of this effort and to support your work going forward.
Thank you so much, Bill. We invite you to stick around, but I know you're a busy guy. I do want to applaud the signing your window. I have one in mind too. So we're all fighting so many battles right now on so many fronts, right?
I need to take that down. I apologize for the political aspect of that, but yeah, I need to take that sign down. It's not appropriate for the political message in the back, so I'll kind of lean over here to block that a little bit. Oh
dear, no, I'm sorry to call that out.
No, it's okay. I'm glad you did, actually, because it depending on the audience, other audiences might not be quite so friendly towards the message. So I appreciate your mentioning it.
Well, if there's anything else that you have to share, or like I said, if you want to stick around, you're welcome. Oh, Farshad has a question. Farshad, go ahead.
Well, actually, just I wanted to commend US Bank, for helping us on this endeavor. And, I worked with US Bank when I was in Wisconsin, and you guys really were pioneers with us. You guys were one of the first entities that was willing to do non-related purchase of tax credits. That is tax credits where you guys, the bank, you weren't the bank or the primary financier. And that was a radical concept, 12 years ago. But you guys also partnered, for example, on a deal that we did in Milwaukee with Prison Rehab reentry with the Marriott Hotel in terms of the purchase of those tax
That's right.
credits as well. And, you guys have always been great partners and, really pioneers. And I look forward now that I'm in New York, that you'll be able to partner with us here in New York to do some of the innovative types of stuff that we did in Wisconsin. And really, you guys should be commended for supporting this effort. Also, by the way, say hi to Zach Boyers and Mark Hirschman and Steve Kramer and all the guys I used to work with at US Bank too.
Absolutely, and I definitely will do that. Mark has left the organization to start something called Twain, which is an ongoing investment partner of ours. But Steve is one of my closest coworkers, and Zach is a longtime friend, and obviously leads our group. So I'll definitely pass that along as well. So. I will say that it's nice to be able to talk to folks in New York that know the US Bank name, obviously because we don't have bank branches and a consumer presence in the Northeast, or mostly even in the Southeast. It is a name that I used to have to say, oh, US Bank, like, oh, you mean Bank of America? No, US Bank. So we don't have the name recognition on the consumer side that we might on the CDFI and commercial side, but we do have a very strong presence in our investments throughout the Northeast, and we do a lot of investments in the new market tax credit and community lending side, even outside of our traditional bank footprint.
Again, thank you so much, Bill. Thank you for Aisha for connecting us with Bill and bringing this grant to our community so that we could continue this really important conversation. So thanks, Bill. Like I said, you can stick around or bail out. I understand. And let's toss back to Jennifer and pick up where we left off.
Wonderful.
I'm going to go off camera, but I'm going to listen for a while. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bill. Okay. That's good news. All of that was good stuff. All of it, $100 billion. Wow. All righty. So ways in which the coalition can help and support your DEI efforts. In our survey, you named a few areas, and we asked this question directly. You mentioned sharing, gathering and sharing best practices, exemplary practices and resources, providing training for board and staff, hosting forums especially around subject matter discussions, loans, and lending discussions. Consider establishing affinity groups, and additional comments included, making sure that the resource allocation is as intended and assisting CDFIs across the state. The items in bold are what we got the most number of responses that we could group. So let's talk a little bit about this list. What do we want to emphasize or enhance, add to this list as we think about the ways in which the coalition can help and add support to your DEI journey? Anybody?
I will actually start by offering that we had a board meeting, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that we as a coalition are going to do, meaning me, because I'm the part-time staff of the coalition, the Queens we, exactly. We're going to launch a listserv. Listserv is a very old-fashioned word, but basically it's like a closed loop email system. We think it's great that we can gather every other month in these all hands meetings, but so much of what we're doing is happening in real time. And there's really a lot of opportunities for people to collaborate, even just on the board level. There's 12 people who are super involved in the CDFI coalition at the board level. And they're, often, can you share this? Can you ask this? So I think there's a lot of opportunity for CDFIs across the state to communicate better with one another. And so I will be launching that by the end of the month. I'm not going to guarantee, before Labor Day or before Memorial Day, but certainly by the end of this month or early June. I'm probably going to use the Gaggle email platform. So I will, I'll send out a notice using the usual channels. Probably what I'll do is send it out and invite people to join. And then I'm probably just going to put you all on the list and you can unsubscribe if you want to. So sometimes it's easier that way. Anybody have thoughts or questions or suggestions about that? Do you think it would be helpful? Nod your head.
I'll jump in, Colleen. I think that's a great idea. And as I look at at this slide and all the suggestions that have been made. I really want to emphasize the host forums, those 2 bullet points there, subject matter discussions, right? Really making sure that any DEI frameworks that we adopt within our organizations really bleed down into the clients that we serve, and that we take a good look at our loan and lending policies, underwriting policies, thinking about how systemic barriers have actually informed even our thinking, right? We think we're flexible, right? And we're mission oriented, but we may still think very much in the institutional sort of approaches to credit decisioning, and we need to reevaluate that within the DEI framework. And then the affinity groups, because we're not all in the same place. So I really wanted to emphasize those 2 and hope that we can move along there.
I have an honest question as you know, as the facilitator, as the administrator of this group. I don't work for CDFI. I don't know from CDFIs, right? I have an honest question. The work that you are all doing individually in your institutions for DEI, do you consider that like, all right, this is our work and this is our work product, or are you willing and able to share with others? Anybody want to take a bite at that question?
Since I was last speaking, I'll go first and say we're absolutely willing to share.
Okay.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Thank you, Colleen, after we got our list.
Okay.
I want to build on this. Thanks, Aisha. I appreciate that, because this is important to look at affinity groups are based on size or based on place. I think of not location, but place on the path. I think about Chad's comments around messaging. I was ready to talk about anti-racism and anti-oppression as some of the language, but he's talking about social justice and equity. So, it's a different place in the path and the journey. Messaging, I heard clearly from both this session and the last session, and glossary and explanations of what we mean. What do we mean by these terms that we use in the context of our work, in our context of our world? Because they can mean different things to different folks, or used differently or misused to evoke fear and hesitancy to take action. What does it mean? So, okay, any other things that we want to emphasize or add? Resonate with you as you move forward and move your organizations forward on its path and its journey. Micah, is it?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that we haven't been able to do yet, and that we're hoping to do soon, is to really look at our loan documents and think about they're built on 40 years of legalese. So they would be intimidating to, the most experienced person. And, as we're trying to expand our market, I think we're doing a decent job around putting out messages, bringing people in. But as one of my staff said, then they come into the house, you've invited them in, they come in and your house is a mess.
That's exactly right.
Your legal docs are inaccessible. And me as a non-lawyer, it's intimidating to think about rewriting them.
Exactly. Okay. When I began my work in this back in the early 80s, I used to say, when we only looked at diversity and then we looked at diversity and inclusion, say, look, this is all about, if you want to share your house, you truly want to share your house, you clean it up. And you then put out the welcome mat and make sure after that people have the key and can occupy it, really. But it is about housekeeping first. So looking at lending and looking at loan documents, lending requirements, as Aisha said, doing our homework, our own assessment, internal assessment. Yes, indeed. What else? Anything else? How can the coalition help support? One or two other comments. Is there anything on this list that you think doesn't work? I want to get to Chad. I think Chad is going to speak, but is there anything on this list that you think is not doable or important? Especially those items in bold that you don't connect to or with, I should say.
What is deeper?
Oh,
It just
deeper.
says deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that the responses, there were some folks who, started and started to engage in this, but they need to go, they're ready to go to the next stage, or ready to go deeper into the issues, ready to go, like Micah was saying, now I'm really ready to look at lending requirements and underwriting requirements as opposed to the commitment statement. They're ready to move out of the kind of the performative mode where, you're making the statements. They're really looking at walking the talk, and because they've uncovered things, they need to go deeper into what does the community truly needs that we serve or have the potential to serve, and where are real barriers, like you were saying, Aisha, systemic barriers. What lenses are we using, and where's the systems and processes that truly present barriers? Does that answer your question? I hope. Going deeper than just the statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. It does. I mean, one of the things I think, and it was referenced earlier, is it Chad? Chad, yes. Just around like common language, and if you're on the advocacy side, right, you kind of know.
Did you freeze for anybody else? Okay, it's not me. Okay, good. Aisha, you're frozen.
Well, with any luck, she'll come back soon.
She'll come back. Chad, did you have something that you wanted to add to our list or enhance from our list?
Yeah, I don't know if it's adding or emphasizing or kind of wrapping it, but I mean, under provide training and who we're targeting with, board, staff, executive teams. And I don't know if training is the best way to advocate for culture change. One of the things that we're doing in our credit union is training and developing to forge the best culture internally. And I think that we've made some strides in the past few years, but then how do we increase that culture to make sure that we're extending outreach to the communities in most need, right? So it's a culture change. And again, some of that can be done through staffing or training. And Tamika's point about, accessibility, we're looking at a project to make sure all of our member agreements, our loan agreements, our disclosures are available in Spanish. And I think with that is an assessment of Tamika's point, like legalese, like how intimidating is it to do business with us or any credit union? Right. When you're looking at one of the top reasons most cited by underserved households why they don't use banking services is they don't trust banks.
That's right.
And they feel that they're giving up some sort of sense of privacy. So that's a change that we as an organization need to fully embrace. And how do you engage that outreach to build that trust and to ensure that it's accessible to everyone.
Chad, this whole conversation has bigger implications because New York State just last week or 10 days ago passed a funding bill for a study of the underbanked. And as someone said on one of my board calls the other day, yeah, because whenever I talk to people who are underserved, in underserved communities, the first thing they say is, boy, could we use another study? you know, so
Yeah, exactly.
I think what we have to do
Overburdening.
right? I think what we have to do is make sure that the conversations that we're having here plug in somehow to that outreach in New York State. And, you know, so that we help them get the information, but then when they get the information, that we help inform the decisions that they're going to make based on that information. So this is a much bigger conversation, you know, than just what you're doing at your institution around this issue. I think this is a, you know, when you start talking about underserved communities, underbanked, you know, there's a lot I think that we could tap into.
Okay, let me get back to Aisha's. Aisha, you froze. And so I want to have you finish your comment.
Yeah, I'm not sure when I froze, but I was just talking about the importance of common language, and then also just strategic use of language and knowing our audience.
Right.
Because if you're on the advocacy side, you know, conservatives don't like justice. They don't like the term social justice. It's liberals that like that term. Right. Conservatives like opportunity. Right. You know, so just even if we could.
Dang.
There we go again.
Yep.
We get to that even if we could. Okay. Yeah, I agree with Aisha. I agree also with Colleen's plugging into information already available. Studies that stop overburdening the communities you serve, the communities of color, communities of low, moderate, modest income. Stop overburdening them with doing the work that we should be doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Aisha, one last time. Even if we could, no.
Oh, darn.
Still, use the chat.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll have it before the end of our session. Is there anything that's burning? We're finished. I'm finished asking our questions. I just want to say one thing before I go. Thank you. I've enjoyed meeting all of you and talking with you, Chad. Yeah, we'll talk offline. But I wish you continued success. Look for our report, and I'll be working with Colleen to get that in place. Anything else? Let me see. If you're going to do more studies, they've done by, yes. Nothing about us, for us, without us.
Yep.
You're absolutely right, Vishal. Yep. All righty. I'm going to turn it back. Thank you again.
Jennifer, I really do want to thank you for your insight and your patience and working with us. I think that we've covered a lot of ground, and we have, you know, we know that we have a lot of work to do, even though we are leaders in this effort. You know, we still have a lot of work to do. So we will be in touch.
Okay.
And, we'll keep you posted, and you do the same.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay. So everybody can unmute now, and we can all talk amongst ourselves. I have a couple of things on my agenda, but this is sharing time. So if anybody has anything to share in the industry, go ahead. I told you about the listserv. Nancy, do you want to jump right in? No, okay. So I told you about the listserv that we're planning to launch. I think that will be helpful, you know, to spur these conversations. And along those lines, Linda McFarlane, who is the president of the board of the coalition, but is also the executive director of the Community Loan Fund of the Capital Region, asked a question that I forwarded to the group earlier this week regarding structured investment agreements with community foundations or other institutional investors. Linda, if you're in a place where you can join us and talk a little bit more about that, and we can see if anyone on this call has any experience or you know, wisdom to share around that area.
Thank you, Colleen. I've been working with the Community Foundation of the Capital Region, and they work with so many different generally private foundations, and a lot of those folks are interested in investing in communities and investing in CDFIs, particularly in loan funds who take on investments. So what I was wondering was, has any other CDFIs experienced this with community foundations? Are there any models that are already in place or sample agreements instead of us pretty much starting from scratch and bringing that up? I think it's a wonderful opportunity for investments because these foundations are essentially doing the same things. Purposeful, sustainable community development, helping underprivileged in a variety of different capacities, the same thing that we're doing as CDFIs. So it seems like it would be a perfect mix. I'm just wondering if there's a model out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. I'm not seeing anyone nodding their heads or jumping into the fray here. So what I'll do is, unless Lloyd, you got something?
Oh, yeah, Colleen, I just wanted to ask Linda a follow-up question. I wasn't as familiar with the community foundations. Can you give us an example?
Sure, happy to. The Community Foundation of the Capital Region works with several philanthropists and they manage their grant programs. So there's a McCarthy's grant program that focuses on individuals of low income in, for example, in Rensselaer County. There's a Schenectady Foundation that works specifically in the area of Schenectady. Some foundations may want to give grants for underprivileged youth in the arts, for example, or in music. So there are a variety of different smaller foundations where they essentially manage. And but these individuals are also wanting to be able to invest in sustainable community development. So there's money backing it through the foundations, but the individuals involved with the that actually own the foundations are interested in investing.
Thank you.
So I think what Linda's looking for is some kind of structure or agreement or anything that you all might have. Maybe it's not a community foundation, maybe it's some other institutional investor that like pools money from, like, I'm actually looking at Babby Jacobs right now to see if in her experience, she knows of such a thing. You know, because I think it's, you know, these individual family foundations, family offices, they might not have the staff or the capacity to make these kind of investments. But what the community foundation does is it brings those resources in, and basically they're a clearinghouse, you know, for grant applications. So Babby, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, and sorry to be off camera.
Okay.
What a great meeting. I love hearing everything you're all talking about. So as Colleen alluded to, I am a volunteer with the American Sustainable Business Network, which represents, we have a pretty unique position in that we work with individual investors. We're a nonprofit membership organization. We have business members, we have policymakers, and we have individual investors, as I said. So with the help of Pam Porter, another volunteer, and myself, we put together a list of 70 CDFIs that take individual investments. We realize this is cumbersome for you all. You know, sometimes it's not as easy as clicking on and getting your financial advisor to move money, but we're trying to get people to have one, relationship deposits in your credit unions and community banks, and then have people make investments in the loan funds with the 0 to 1 to 3% return over 5 to 7 years. They realize this is about relationships and community. And I don't have any hard, fast statistics, but I can say we've moved several $1 million with just individuals. And we also, what's fun is you never know who people are affiliated with. So we have one member who's on the board of the Unitarian Church and saying, we need to look at our endowments. We need to be investing here. This is not risky. This is community. Every dollar we put in here is going to give us $8. What a great return. So we've got people talking to their alma maters, to their community foundations, to try to leverage some of the big capital and take the burden off you all. But if any of you take individual investments, we'd love to put you on our list. We put together a resource list of how people can do their homework. And we know that you're busy and we don't want to take up your time, but we want to get some money to you. So let me know how I can help, and I'll pop my email in the chat, and I'm happy to share the PDF. I'll put that in the chat as well. So open to feedback, and thank you all for so much for your work.
Thanks, Babby. That's really helpful. Farshad?
Also,
Go ahead, Nancy.
you know, we have Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors on our board, and sometimes he brings us a family foundation, you know, over the years, who express to their advisors who are Rockefeller Philanthropy that they want to do something in a specific community, a neighborhood, a purpose. And so, a long time ago, it was childcare. More recently, it was after Hurricane, well, it's a pretty long time now, but Staten Island after Hurricane Sandy. So, so it really is very personal to the families, who have those family foundations. There isn't a rule from, that goes across them. So kind of a menu of opportunities for them is probably more appropriate than picking one thing. That's just what I was saying. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. And Farshad?
Yeah, Linda, first, I would say I'd encourage you actually to look at new ways of doing things, because for CDFIs, one of the biggest challenges that I've faced in terms of providing money to CDFIs, in my previous roles, is providing that money. Okay, of course you can provide it as a grant, but when you provide it as a loan, it sometimes cannot be as impactful as you would like, because there are some negative effects to having that loan, quote unquote, still on your balance sheet, especially when you're applying for CDFI programs. So if there's a way for the investment in the CDFI to be provided as an equity vehicle, that would be incredibly helpful to CDFIs, because when they apply for like CDFI, TA, or FA money, because then that money is not considered loan capital. It can actually be considered as equity on the books. And for the philanthropist, they can get their rate of return either through like a warrant agreement or a put call option. But the bottom line is, I know this is like, maybe this is just gobbledygook, is just that if we could just get creative about ways to be able to have philanthropic entities invest in CDFIs through equity vehicles rather than loan vehicles, I think that would be incredibly impactful.
Well, let's consider that one of the first things we're going to have a discussion on the listserv. Okay, I think this definitely warrants further discussion, and while Linda's bringing it to our attention, I'm sure that there are other opportunities, that might arise. So thank you for this really helpful discussion. One of the other questions that came up on the board email, because I am mindful of time, it's already 10 minutes to 1, time flies, right? Is from Giovanna from La Fuerza Unida, who asked if anybody was planning to respond for the request for ideas from City Foundation through their $50 million Community Finance Innovation Fund. The deadline is Tuesday at 4 p.m. And I don't know whether it was on anybody's radar. It seems kind of specific, and it didn't seem like something, it seemed to require a lot of collaboration. And is anybody applying for this familiar with it? No.
Oh, hello, it's Yankee. Sorry, I'm off camera. We are not applying, but there's another entity that's applying, and if they are approved, we would benefit from the grant. And my understanding of the RFP is it's not for individual CDFIs like us. It's not a good fit, but it's good for like OFN or consortium of CDFIs, where you have the entity applying and then just having sub grantees that provide the direct service.
Does that answer your question, Giovanna?
Hi, yes, thank you. So it did say that it was for intermediary organizations. I was just wondering if anyone knew of an agency that is planning to apply, so that we could put it in our radar to, kind of follow up and see what they're putting out as far as support for CDFIs.
Well, again, that's something that I think we can add to the chat. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the initial round, this is the initial first round, and then they announce who they select. And I think during that announcement, we're going to get a sense of who's going to get the money. And then, if there's room, if they haven't already selected the sub-grantees, there's an opportunity for us to connect with, the successful candidates. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Anybody else with thoughts on that? I had one other thing when we talked about, what the coalition can do to support either DEI work or other work. I know that you're all busy, and I don't want to make extra work for you, but We had, on our last board call, we talked about some proposed discussion topics, that we can bring in industry experts and convene these meetings. And some of the things we talked about were affordable housing preservation. And actually it was Karen Haycox from Habitat who brought this up. When you're doing rental housing with LIHTC funds, to consider the look back period and to go into that with planning to convert that rental housing to HDFCs. Again, not everybody's in housing, some are in small business, so this doesn't apply to everybody, but we might be able to have these side conversations on the listserv. Compensation and hiring challenges. I'm sure you all are struggling with that as the board is. Concerns about what happens to staffing levels when the COVID relief money stops flowing. Are you all, staffing up, being very muscular right now and wondering what's going to happen? Expansion beyond your founders field. So that's, specifically for like a school credit union or a hospital credit union. When you start thinking about expanding beyond that discrete pool of your original customers, what does that look like? How do you do it? And in that expansion mode, regional expansion, models for smart growth, technology platforms, human resources. So these are all the conversation topics that we were thinking of. I urge you to add to them because I don't know what's going on in your individual institutions or in your regions. When we talk about our affinity groups, whether it's size of the institution or whether it's region, that would be really helpful. I emailed a link around yesterday. I have a Google Doc up that you can add to, or if it's easier for you, just respond to my email and I'll put it in the doc. So at this point, it's 12:54. I've said all I need to say, except one more thing. We are going to have our annual meeting of members on Friday, June 17th. That is our voting meeting. So I urge you to stick a pin in your calendar for that. I'll send out a reminder in our next email. But we've got 5-6 minutes for the airing of grievances or anything else that you want to share. So have at it. Come on, what are you doing this weekend? What? It's gonna be hot. Are the we don't call them gypsy moths anymore. What are the sponge moths out up north yet? You don't know? Okay. All right, well, that's all I got. If nobody's got anything else to share, be on the lookout for an email inviting you to join the Gaggle email platform. And I hope that our conversations along email will be as fruitful and as enlightening as today's was. Can't tell you how much I enjoy working with all of you and what meaningful work you're doing in the community and how much I appreciate it. So have a great weekend, everybody. Ciao.
Thanks, Colleen.